She was once known as Oprah's spiritual advisor, turning heads for her beloved book, A Return to Love. Now, Marianne Williamson is making headlines as a 2024 U.S. presidential candidate, and she's joining us to discuss her hopes for healing the country. Plus, Marianne is offering her thoughts on keeping the queer community safe. This is Advocate Now. You said this recently, and I found it so fascinating. You said neo-fascism is the disease, but neoliberalism has weakened our immune system. So if the division is the problem, or at least part of the problem, what would you consider the solution?
Real democracy, real adherence to the principles of the Declaration of Independence. When I said that neoliberalism has weakened our immune system, this is what I mean. Neoliberalism is an economic paradigm in which trickle-down economics has become the order of the day. And what that means is that the corporation's main responsibility is to its stockholders. So there has been a massive transfer of wealth into the stockholder class at the expense of workers, at the expense of community, at the expense of, as we were talking about before, the expense of the environment. This has weakened people. It leaves people without even the bandwidth to take to be involved in civic engagement, much less be involved in like going to the PTA meeting. People are just trying to survive. You have so many people, millions of people in America who have to live who have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to put food on the table. You have a third of America's workforce that are living on less than $15 an hour, and that's not a living wage where they live. You have 70% of Americans who report that they live with financial stress. We have 60% of Americans who live paycheck to paycheck. And that's what I mean by it's weakened our immune system. Every individual is the immune system. Of course, there are racists. Of course, there are homophobes. Of course, there are anti-Semites. Of course, there are elements of American society. We're not an enlightened species yet. But when people are strong in their being and have time and have bandwidth to take part, then they can deal with these things. That's what an immune system does. You just flush things out. And that's what I mean. There are too many people in this country who just in the richest country in the world are finding economic survival difficult. Why should the majority of people in the richest country in the world find it so hard to survive? Mm-hmm. Now, if you're in the top 20% of American economics, life is good. You know, 20% of Americans, the economy is fine. 20% is nowhere near what it should be. That leaves between what considered 70 and 80% of people for whom the economy is not going well at all. So right now you have, the president saying that, part of his message is the economy is getting better. But I think we have to ask ourselves, who's it getting better for?
Well, regardless of the outcome of the election, you are succeeding immeasurably because you're disrupting the system. And in the fight for justice, there needs to be disruption. But in the case that you do win, how do you plan to go beyond disruption and enter the phase of reparation?
Well, the president holds a lot of power. The president does not have a magic wand, and we don't want the president to have a magic wand. The president is, the executive branch is one of 3 co-equal branches of government, but the president has a lot of power. For instance, day one, I could cancel the Willow Project. I could unilaterally close some military installations around the world because I don't understand why we have 800 of them. I could demand that there be an audit of the Pentagon. I could cancel all contracts that the U.S. government has with union-busting companies. I could bring together the greatest experts in childhood development in order to begin a process of transferring huge resources into the lives of children 10 years and younger. If we want to have a prosperous and a peaceful society 20 years from now, we need to take better care of our 10-year-olds today. I could begin that mass mobilization from a dirty economy to a clean economy and from a war economy to a peace economy. The president has a lot of power. The president can not only use executive orders, but the president, I think, very, very importantly, has the power of the bully pulpit. The bully pulpit is, this is the way that Franklin Roosevelt was able to rally the American people for World War II and for our involvement in World War II. He talked to people. And that, I think, is something that would be very, very much a part of my approach to the presidency. We need a president who gets real with the American people and tells the truth as he or she sees it, much in the way that someone like Franklin Roosevelt did, who takes a stand, even when you don't win every fight with, insurance companies or pharmaceutical companies or big oil companies or defense contractors. The American people would see what I was trying to do. And I would be explaining to the American people what exactly is going on in this town, namely Washington, D.C., that I, your president, who is advocating for your good, am having such a hard time getting you what you need to thrive.
And not to mention, so many people feel unsafe in this country. I mean, many people in the queer community feel unsafe. How do you hope to shift that for that community and ultimately anyone who feels that they're being discriminated against or maybe erased or not seen?
Well, first of all, by my own words and my own actions. But in terms of, for instance, the transgender community in this country, I'm sorry to say they have a reason to be concerned. And one of the first things I would do is to declare a special protection status for the transgender community. There are already governors. I know this has happened in Michigan. I think it's necessary. I would also direct my Department of Justice to vigorously investigate and go after any civil rights violations against transgender people. You're seeing what's happening in Florida right now, for instance, and in some other states where there is an attack. I mean, we shouldn't kid ourselves. There is now. Look at some of these abortion laws. There is a level of attack on women, attack on LGBTQ, attack on transgender. We should not kid ourselves, because what's happening is every generation, the job of every generation is to expand the democratic franchise. And there are people in our country today, including, one now declared presidential candidate, governor of Florida. This man is seeking to use his power in that state to literally limit the democratic franchise and the freedom of Americans. That would not stand with me. And the people trying to get at any American, any group of Americans, that have to go through me.
Some say that on a soul level that we're all driven by the same thing in life. Religionists might call it God, spiritualists might call it miracles of the universe. Someone else might call it love. But do you think that people get hung up on the wording and really in many ways, we're all just trying to know and understand the same thing with different approaches?
Of course we are. Because I would even add to what you said, people who use secular terms and they call it ethics, living a good life. People's words, I totally agree with you. Let's not get hung up on the words. Some of the best people I've ever known call themselves atheists. Some of the most judgmental people I've ever known consider themselves deeply religious. So I think we all know we need to go beyond words, beyond concept. And that's why our Declaration of Independence is such a good guide, because one of our first principles is out of many one. The idea here in this country, theoretically, is that we could be all kinds of ethnicity, sex, sexuality, gender, color, race. That's what the ultimate goal is, that you could be whatever you want to be, as long as it doesn't hurt anyone else, but that we are unified by a common set of values. And that common set of values is that we're all equal, created equal by God, and that we would create in our country, to the best of our ability, a society in which anyone, no matter who they are, gets to thrive.
And we thank you for all the work that you've been doing for so many years to raise the consciousness of humanity. An honor to talk to you today. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Thank you. I'm grateful to you, and the very nature of your questions makes it clear to me that we have heard one another and seen one another, and I appreciate that very, very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
I'm Sonia Baghdady. Thanks for watching and advocating. For more stories and content like this, visit advocate.com and advocatechannel.com.